Hi, taking a look at the Cleveland Puzzle from The Secret by Byron Preiss and how it was solved, what I might notice about, especially for this one, the picture. Didn't see a ton of things about the text. To be honest, it's hard to kind of follow it and comprehend it, I think, even if you're there. I know the guys that found it were actually digging in the wrong place for hours and they almost gave up and did kind of last chance find the right side of it. So I think that puzzle is highly, the text of it is highly directive once you get there, but I don't have a ton I can do with it from home, I don't think. So let's take a look at some of the things that jump out at me in the picture. And again, a little disclaimer, I'm not saying that this proves or disproves anything really. It's things that I noticed and things that maybe aren't there, maybe they are. So let's see what we've got. Alright, first, I know that the artist said that the helmet mattered, or that had something he did with it. He said, wow, it's been a long time, I don't really remember. And so one thing that I saw right there at the top of that park is Gordon Park, and it kind of looks a lot like the helmet, doesn't it? If you put them on top of each other, it lines up pretty well. You can even make it bigger, and kind of that road that goes through the park follows his shoulder pretty nicely. Again, is that intentional? Maybe not. If you have kind of some crazy ideas, one thing I sometimes do to check them is you can tell somebody that really doesn't know that much about this, right? You show them that. For me, it's my wife, and I can tell right away if I'm totally off base or if maybe I've got something, depending on if she says, oh yeah, that could work, or if she just kind of, her eyes glaze over and she stops paying attention, then I've probably gone too far. That doesn't mean I won't keep chasing it if she thinks I've gone crazy, but it's a good way to bounce an idea off somebody that isn't obsessed and see what they think. They're also very unlikely to go and try and dig something up. It's a safe way to check. So that's a steel helmet likely from World War I. That's what it looks based on, and that park was named after one of the founders of the Cleveland Iron Mining Company. So iron and steel, very connected. That's the Brody helmet from World War I. So, and again, a nice little tie-in. I don't know if it's intentional, but you can make it happen. And then, kind of more interestingly, if you look at the curve of Rockefeller Park, I believe is the name of it, where all the cultural gardens are, it lines up pretty nicely with the centaur's body, actually, without really having to do very much. So if you put it on top of that, and I probably should have played with the transparency of this here, but you can see it almost looks like a skeleton, that road going down through him, like a spine and then his leg. And I don't know if that road would have been there back in 1981. Maybe they've changed the park around or something. One thing I like to try and do, since they didn't have Google Maps back then, I like to try and find sources or maps that they might have had. This is the NOAA map from I think 1975, but around there it certainly would have been available to them. And you can see the contours there that run down through the park really do match up well with the centaur's body. So I think if they found a map from around that time and kind of based just the outline of his body and that helmet on some of the features around it, I think it definitely works. Depending on what you look at, it might look stronger or it might not, but I think it's definitely there. A little bit too much just to be a pure coincidence for me, but you can make your own judgment. If you extend it out a little bit, and this gets a little, who knows, maybe a little crazy, but that, what would you call it, the top of that pedestal maybe, lines up pretty well with that road. And if you kind of follow it out towards the end of it, you do hit Daffodil Hill at Lakeview Cemetery, and the daffodil flower is right there. I know there's some people say it kind of, they might have messed it up based on the months and everything. I don't know exactly. I've read just a little bit about that, but I think it is supposed to be a daffodil. And Daffodil Hill right there is pretty famous. A lot of famous people are buried in this cemetery. And this next part is unrelated. If you're easily creeped out, you might not want to look at it. Ooh, it scared me. Last night when I was working on this alone in the dark, everybody else is asleep, and I was like, oh, what's the Hazarat monument at this cemetery? I clicked on it, and this statue is one of the most intimidating and creepy ones I've ever seen. Check that out. It's like the Black Angel of Death or something, like the Victorious Death. She's like crying black tears. It is creepy. Unrelated to the puzzle, but it's worth reading about. One thing I like about this is you just find all kinds of little local history and local stories that make it fun. But yeah, it's a really weird one. Worth looking into if you're interested in it. All right, and if you followed that road down then from Daffodil Hill to kind of where you'd need to get, a couple things. First off, you hit Liberty Boulevard, which they renamed most of it into Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, but there is still a little bit of it left. And on that, there's an L and a bell, which would make me think Liberty Bell or Liberty Boulevard, pretty quickly. There's also Wade Park Lagoon, where there used to be a statue of a centaur. Now, it's been quite a long time, but it didn't last very long. It must not have been built very well, and they didn't want to pay to maintain it. But back in that lagoon right there in the middle, there used to be the statue of a centaur. So that's an interesting piece. When you start looking at Cleveland and centaurs, there's really only about two things that pop up, and that's one of them. And the other one is the Centaur program at NASA's Glenn Research Center. It would have been the Lewis Research Center at some points in time. But then I love space travel. I love space exploration. So this is one of the upper stages of a rocket that got us to the moon, past the moon. It was, it was a pretty big deal, and I think it's the first one that really was able to use hydrogen well to get us to kind of some new heights. Literally, I guess, new heights. And that is right there in Cleveland. It's a little ways away from kind of this general area that we've been looking in, but it's an important part of Cleveland history. And if you take that chalice that he's holding, and I know it looks like one of the fountains, I'm not denying that at all, at the Italian gardens, but that water coming off of it, I mean, water doesn't exactly do that, right? That looks almost more like gas to me personally. And if you look at the rocket itself, those little, nozzles on the bottom of it, I think, there's at least a resemblance there. It might not be perfect, obviously, but when you think Centaur in Cleveland, this is going to be your number one most important thing. And I know a few other people have mentioned it. Even if you turn it upside down so it kind of looks like it's taking off, and those branches and all that kind of stuff do start to look a little bit like a rocket launch pad, don't they? Again, that's probably maybe where I've started to take it a little too far, so I usually stop myself right about there. However, that triangle on there that a lot of people have linked to Euclid, I mean, I would agree, right? Geometry, triangles, but it's also the symbol for fire when it's in that orientation. And that little ball looks a lot like the moon to me, especially just with the way it's kind of shaded and how it kind of looks like it could be in one of the stages of the moon. So if you have fire and the moon, and they built the rocket there that harnessed hydrogen to take us to the moon, I like that a lot, actually. That points, and it would just be a clue that would point you to Cleveland, I think. You have to keep in mind that I can find this stuff in one Google search, but in 1981, they would have had to read a lot, maybe, encyclopedias, maybe. However they would have found it, but that would have been something that was in the news, right? Possibly. They were still using it, I think, as late as the 80s. So it's an interesting little tie-in for me, and I do think that one's pretty strong. This might not be as strong, but they had about 8 pictures from NASA. And honestly, this one's pretty ridiculous, but that guy jumped out at me. So at this Glenn Research page on NASA's page, that guy, and I saw his helmet, and I looked at the way he's holding his hand, and even how he's standing, and I was like, that guy kind of looks like the Centaur. I mean, like I said, it's pretty ridiculous, but I was also like, you know, that one just more cracks me up. I wouldn't go basing my solve on anything like that. Alright, well thank you for viewing. I am going to be doing more of this, so if there's something you'd like to see laid over onto a map or onto another feature from this, I've tried to stay away from the things that you can, that are just out there with a quick and easy search. I know maybe some of this is already out there, but I think putting it together and just doing some more exploration of it is interesting. So if you want to see something else, let me know. Thanks for your time.